Okay, so that was an interesting prayer, and it's not often that the speaker starts from like behind the curtains like this, but I'm feeling like tonight's going to be a good night, because as I've been preparing and getting ready to talk to you guys, God's put a lot on my heart and a lot on my mind to say. So let's just get cracking. Let's get straight into it. But I want to do something. I don't normally get you guys to respond in this kind of a way. But I was talking to some kids earlier. Raise your hand if this is your first time here tonight. It's a bit brave, a bit scary. Raise your hand. Whole bunch of you guys doing your first time. That's all right. A whole bunch of you guys are liars, because I didn't even see the person that said it was their first time, but that's okay. Hey, if you haven't figured it out yet, here at Ignite, we do a whole bunch of stuff with you, followed by a talk on God. And this term, we're doing our What's Your Game series. And I was really privileged 2 weeks ago to begin this series. And as I was talking to you guys, for those of you that weren't here or don't quite remember 2 weeks back, as I was talking to you guys, I began by stating the obvious. I began by telling everyone that we all begin and finish at the exact same place, that we're all born and one day we all die. You're like, wow, newsflash. What's different for each and every single person is how you live the time in between your birth and your death. And quite often this is referred to as the game of life. And I told you guys the last time I was up here speaking that as I've looked at the game of life, as I've looked at the way people move around the board, I've picked up a couple of common themes. Common themes being that every single person seems to try to get themselves a job, to earn themselves money, so they can buy stuff or they can buy experiences to make themselves happy. And if you get more stuff, more experiences, you find yourself being really, really happy, and you call that winning. And I was thinking about it, and that seems like a relatively okay way to go about life. I mean, it's almost relatively appealing in a sense that, yeah, I try to get stuff, to do stuff to make myself happy. There's nothing too bad, there's nothing too wrong with that. But as I thought about it more, I started to realize that, hang on a second, that God is here and God is inviting us to play a different game, a better game, a more significant game, a game that has a greater purpose and a better sense of direction than the game that just is all about getting stuff for ourselves. That was 2 weeks ago, and then last week, Haya began her first talk by starting with this awesome analogy about a game of Snap. Haya told the story, if you weren't here, I'll quickly recap it. She told the story about how when she was younger, she'd always play Snap with her dad. I presume you guys know it's something with cards and you yell Snap. I don't really play that game. It doesn't involve enough intelligence for me. Seems like Haya's kind of game. Anyway, she used to always, I can say that I taught Haya. I know exactly what she's like in the classroom. I teach most of you brighter than you guys. She's awesome. Anyway, shh. Here's Haya, she's playing Snap against her dad, and she's just like, yeah, I got that, I keep winning, I'm awesome, Dad, you're terrible. She thought she was the bee's knees, whatever you call it, I'm too old for your kind of lingo, and then her dad's just like, trollolol, guess what, I'm not even trying. Did I get that right? Was that wrong? I'm not sure. Whatever it is, he's just like, you know what, I've never tried against you. I've just been trying to make you feel special, to make you feel good, and Haya's like, nah, Dad, I don't believe you. Game on. And so they played, she lost, they played again, she lost again, they played again, she lost again, and if I understood it correctly last week, games of Snap don't tend to go away anymore because he just keeps whipping her up every single time. But Haya went on to say something that I thought was quite profound and actually quite true. She said that there's an extent to which we all seem to think that we are in total control of our games, or that we seem to think that we are the central characters in our life stories, or that at the end of the day we seem to think that we are the most important, that we are the most powerful, that we are the most significant people, and that when we want stuff, we should get stuff for ourselves now when we want it, because it's all about winning our game. And she said, you know what, in reality, that's wrong. That's so far from the truth, because in reality, at the end of the day, God's the only person that is in control of our game. And then Haya asked this question. She said, who's sitting here knows exactly what they'll be doing in 10 years' time? Who's sitting here will know exactly what they'll be doing in 10 years' time. Now, I know that if I asked you right now, what will you be doing in 10 years' time? You'll be sitting there and you might have some idea what the future will look like. But when it comes to actually nutting out the finer details, the finer exactly where you'll be, who your friends will be, what you'll be studying, or where you'll be working, where you'll be living, those small details, the reality is none of you know what will be happening in 10 years' time. None of you know, but God knows. Now, the Bible says that God has plans and purposes for your life. He has plans to prosper you and not to harm you. And I want you guys to hold on to that idea of God has plans and purposes for you, because that is where I want to go tonight. I want to look at this idea of God's plans, God's purpose, and God being in control of the game of life. And I want to ask you guys a question. Are you choosing to play God's game? Hey, hold that in your mind, and I want to begin with a DVD clip that I found from a friend. It's the story of a bear and a lion. Check out the story of a bear and a lion. I must be getting soft in my old age. It's not quite the clip that I actually originally planned to show you guys. Could see stuff that's a little bit better and had a better soundtrack. But when I first sat down to watch that clip, I was like, yeah, that bear's going to get killed. That lion's going to cut it to pieces. This is going to be sick. It's going to be awesome. Sitting there watching them, I don't know, I was just like, I'm going to watch some stuff die. That's how guys are, right? That's why we play games, we shoot stuff. And I was all pumped up, and then that bear gets up onto that log, and it falls into the water. And as the bear fell into the water, everything changed for me, because you couldn't see it in the image that was shown to you guys, but as the bear fell into the water, something on its face reminded me of my dog, Ruby. You see, a few weeks ago, we taught my dog, Ruby, how to swim. What we did is we threw a toy in the pool. She jumped in the pool. She didn't sink. She can swim now. It's all good, all right? My dog's actually a really good swimmer. I've seen you guys swim at the swimming carnival. My dog can waste all of you guys. I mean, you're slow. You think Jackson's fast? My dog will swim that 50 meters in about 24 seconds. Just pow, like that. Anyway, I was watching the bear in the water, and I looked at its facial expressions, and something about the bear reminded me of my dog. And all of a sudden, within the sense where this bear was just urgently freaking out, something within me just became really uneasy. And I switched from Team Lion straight to Team Bear, and I was like, you get away, bear. You got to get out of here. And when I saw that lion clutching at the bear's face, I was just like, oh, this is not good. Don't want to watch this make me sick. What am I supposed to use this for? And I got to the end of that, and I was like really unnerved and still unsettled, even though I knew it was a happy ending, because I started thinking to myself, you know, how scary would it be for us to genuinely fear for our lives? How scary would it be to genuinely be fearful for your life? How often does it feel like in life like you're swimming up against the stream? Or how close do we sometimes come to total defeat? I guess for most of us living here, we don't find ourselves swimming upstream quite to that extent or so totally against the wall. I mean, we live in Australia. One or two of you may find yourselves in that situation. But I just thought to myself, when you find yourself swimming upstream, when you find yourself facing total defeat, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to know that there's someone who is always there for you? Wouldn't it be nice to know that you had a protector? Wouldn't it be nice to know that you had a father bear, a provider? Wouldn't it be nice if only when stuff was going wrong? Hang on a second. We don't need if onlys. God is always watching. God is always there. God is always willing and asking us if we are willing to have him in our lives. He is wanting to step in. Though we may live in a broken world, God's plans are only for the good of his people. Though we may live in a world where things are totally corrupted, God longs for us to prosper, to grow, and he longs to bless you guys. And so I ask you, who here knows where they'll be in 10 years' time? Who actually knows what the future exactly holds out to the finer details for you guys? Well, God knows. Many of you will be aware that I was actually born in South Africa. I'm not from here. That I grew up in South Africa. I lived the first 9 years of my life there. After living in South Africa for 9 years, we moved to New Zealand. My parents then stayed there for another 9 years, and then they decided that they'd had enough of New Zealand and decided to move again, and we came to Perth. That's a lot of moving for a young guy, and as I came to Perth, I used to tell this joke of, I've lived in South Africa for 9 years, I've lived in New Zealand for 9 years, I'm going to live in Perth for 9 years, and then I'm moving to Canada. It's not actually a funny joke, but anyway, that's just what I used to say to people when I first got here. And I've always wondered, actually, where will I be in 9 years after being in this country for 9 years? Will I be off to Canada? And I guess the reality is I still don't 100% know the answer, because this is my 9th year in this country. By the end of this year, I'll be able to answer that question fully for the first time, and only then will I be able to answer it. Who knows where we'll be in 10 years? Certainly not us. I couldn't even figure out 9. When I finished high school, I was a little bit unsure about what to do in terms of a profession. Many of you guys are unsure about what to do for your jobs. And as I was coming to the end of my high school years, I was 17, 18 years of age, and we're moving to another country. I was like, well, what should I do? What do I want to study? And I thought, oh, you know what? Psychology or training to be a psychiatrist would be a really good profession. I think I'd like to do that. And I thought, you know what? Actually, being a teacher, I love English, I love history, I love people. That would be a good job. And if I become a teacher, I'll get a promotion, I'll become a principal or a deputy principal. That sounds like a good way to live life. I thought, oh, maybe I should go into ministry. Maybe I should become a pastor. And I was 17, 18 years of age, and I'm like, well, it's 3 different jobs. I can't do all 3. So what am I going to study? What am I going to train to do? And so I found myself praying to God, saying, Lord, just give me some form of direction. Please tell me, what should I study? What should I do? And I remember as I was praying as a 17, 18-year-old guy, as I was praying, I got this distinct feeling from God. You're not going to train to become a pastor. It's not the right thing to do now. So I thought to myself, okay, well, won't become a pastor. It's not the right thing to do now. So I went off to uni and I started a combined course studying psychology and studying to become a teacher. The first year of psychology, terrible. Absolutely hated it. So I dropped that one, and all of a sudden I had this direction. I had a pathway for me. I was training to become a teacher. While I was at uni, I started hanging out. Well, actually, while I was at uni, I met a group of people, and we were praying about how we could serve at a local church. And I felt God saying to go start a small group to go work with young people. And so I started this small group. There weren't many young guys in this group, but it started growing. And so this church decided to hire a pastor, and this guy came and he went after a while. And I found myself after a few years being the leader of Ignite, and the leader of Ignite had been growing and had been growing and been growing. And I came to the point where I finally finished uni, and I was teaching for the first year here at this school. And all of a sudden there was an explosion at Ignite in terms of numbers, and it started growing incredibly fast. And I was just like, well, what on earth is going on here? God, what am I supposed to do with this? I mean, I can barely teach, and I'm not a pastor, and yet I'm trying to do both things whilst having a full-time job. And then this ministry kept growing and became one of the largest of the state and probably one of the largest of the country now. And I ended up becoming a pastor, as you know, and becoming a teacher, as you guys know. And I sort of sat down, and I often still do this. I sit down and I go, God, how the heck did all this happen? Why do we have so many people here? Like, what were you doing? What are you thinking getting me involved in all of this? And every single time I start wondering, what's happening? Why is this happening? How did this work out? I come back to the same answer every single time. It's because God was in control. Every single time I realize God has been in control. You see, if I had ignored the feeling as an 18-year-old guy, and if I had gone and studied to be a pastor, then I wouldn't have become a teacher. If I didn't become a teacher, then I wouldn't have been teaching a bunch of students here. And if I wasn't teaching a bunch of students here, they wouldn't have found out that Mr. Harris was doing something. They wouldn't have come to check out Ignite. It wouldn't have grown. None of this would have happened. None of this would have existed if I hadn't responded as a young guy to a feeling I had. All those students that first started coming, they've all graduated now, and most of them are your senior leaders sitting in this place alongside you guys. And we're so blessed and privileged that God knew. He knew that the thing for me to be doing was teaching, and he knew that bigger and better than teaching was being a pastor. But he knew that if I was just a pastor, and I don't mean just in a negative sense, but just a pastor, then I wouldn't have had connections with you guys. He had a plan. God had a plan and a purpose that was so much bigger in the game of life that I was trying to play. God has plans and purposes for each and every single one of you guys. Plans to prosper you, plans for good stuff to happen in your life. The question really is, do you trust him enough to play his game instead of the world's game? Sometimes when you're playing God's game, it seems kind of crazy, kind of out there. I'm sure many of you know the story of Noah and the ark. I presume you all have heard it at some stage. For those that don't know it, I'll quickly retell it. Basically, what happened is about thousands of years ago, you can argue about that date if you want, thousands of years ago, God was looking down upon the earth and he saw all the people and he went, wow, this place is messed up. It's corrupt. This place is full of evil. What the heck has gone wrong with my creation? What am I going to do about the fact that things are totally messed up? And God's like, oh, I've got a plan. I need to fix this. I need to solve this problem. So I'm going to start afresh. I'm going to wipe the slate clean. But as God's looking down at humanity, so messed up, so evil, so bad, so terrible, he sees this one person in his family. He sees Noah. He says, well, I can't destroy Noah. He is one of my people. And so God speaks to Noah, and God says, hey, Noah, I want you and your family to build a giant boat. And I want you to then grab a whole bunch of animals, and I want you to put the animals along with your family on the boat, because I'm going to send rain, and I'm going to flood this place, and I'm going to kill everyone. Because there's so much evil in this place, and it's the only way I can start again. And Noah's like, excuse me, there is a drought in this place. Where the heck is the rain going to come from? But okay, I'll play your game, God. I will build a boat. I'll get animals. I'll put them on. We'll see what happens. Sometimes God's plan may seem crazy. Sometimes God's plan may seem totally out there. For Noah and his family, I'm sure they were ridiculed. I'm sure they're insulted at times. I'm sure they felt like they were really weird, but they decided to trust in God and his plan. And so the rains came down. The world flooded, and they lived. Because God's plan for his followers are always good. God's plan for his followers are always good. Sure, his plan may seem confusing. Sure, God's plan may seem tough. Yeah, it may seem to contradict absolutely everything that wisdom would tell you. But God's plan is a good plan. He has a purpose. He has a plan for you to grow you. Perhaps I find this really helpful when I start thinking about the conversion of Paul. If you don't know who Paul is, he's an incredible character in the biblical narrative. Paul, he was a Pharisee, which means he was a religious leader. And as a religious leader, Paul hated Christians. He hated Christians with a passion. So what Paul used to do is he used to find Christians and he'd try to arrest them. He'd persecute them. He'd try to find them. He even ended up overseeing the killing, the stoning of one guy, Stephen. Stephen was one of the early leaders of the church, and Paul stood by and said, yep, this is good, as people grabbed stones and hurled it upon his body, so that his body broke and he died. This is Paul. We can conclude that at this stage in his life, Paul is a pretty bad guy. But there was another person, a guy named Ananias. And Ananias was walking along, and one day he felt God speaking to him. Ananias goes, yes, God, tell me what you want. And God says, Ananias, what I want you to do is I want you to go to Paul's house. I want you to go meet with Paul. And Ananias is like, excuse me, God? I know Paul. He hates Christians. He kills Christians. He arrests Christians. God, bad plan, terrible plan. Nuh-uh, not a way, don't want to do it, don't want to have anything to do with that. Terrible God. And Ananias is wrestling with God, and God says, go to Paul's house. I want you to go to Paul's house. And so Ananias goes, well, you know what? I am not going to fear. I am not going to fear what men can do to one another. I'm not going to fear persecution. I trust that I serve a living and powerful God. And so Ananias, he says, right, God, you want me to go to this man's house? I will go. And the Bible doesn't tell us. I have absolutely no idea how Ananias was feeling. The Bible doesn't tell us. But in my mind, if that was me going to someone's house and I knew that they like to kill Christians, to persecute Christians and arrest Christians, I would have been totally packing it. I would have been freaked out. As I rocked up to the door, I would have been like paranoid as heck. I'd been looking around expecting people to jump me, people to hurt me, people to beat me. I'd be ready to run like crazy. I don't know how Ananias was feeling, but I know he rocks up at Paul's house. He walks in, and in that moment, Ananias and Paul, there's healing, there's prayer. Paul gives his life to God, becomes a Christian that day, and Paul becomes the guy that writes half of the New Testament, becomes one of the key leaders in the church. And Ananias, he makes a decision. It's a decision to play God's game. It's a game where God says, yeah, I have got plans and purposes for you. It's far more important than anything else. I got a good plan for you. Trust me. Doesn't matter what God's plan looks like. It may seem like it's tough. Probably is. It may seem like you're going to get persecuted or laughed at. Maybe you will. But at the end of the day, like Noah, like Ananias, God's plans are so much better than what our plans could be. Who here knows where they'll be in 10 years' time? I didn't. Who here knows exactly what you should be studying? I don't. Only God knows where you guys should be going. And so tonight, as I close up, I want to throw these questions at you guys, these challenges really. When your plans come up against God's plans, I want to encourage you guys to choose to play God's game in life. I want you to know that absolutely every single person is born, every single person is going to die. We are all playing this game of life, and I want to encourage you guys to play God's game in life because His plans, His purposes are good. He knows where you're heading. He knows where you're going. When I think through my life, when I think through every single thing I've been through, every single fight, every single move, every single friendship, every single breakup, every single test, when I think through my life, I'm so incredibly grateful that when I needed a rock, I had someone there for me. When I needed a protector, I had a bear there for me. Because in my life story, in my journey, alongside me, I have always had God. And I know that He is alongside you guys if you'll just choose Him. So will you choose God? Will you trust Him? Will you step into His plans and His purposes for your life? Will you play God's game? Let's pray as we close for tonight. Father, I thank you that we could meet here tonight. We could hang out here as a group of friends, socializing and relaxing in this incredible country that you've given us. And Lord, as we now leave this place for this week, I just ask, Father, that we would choose to play your game in life, that would trust you, would trust your plans, your purposes, and that would know and know and know and know that you are good, that your plans are good. So Lord, help us as a group of people to reject any of the oppression, any of the trouble that may come from our friends, from our family, from the world, any of that, Lord. Help us to see through the lies and to see the truth that is you. Help us to be like Noah. Help us to be like Ananias, Lord. May we play your game. In your name I pray. Amen.